for it. And there's a high return on investment for attackers to set up email environments, to be able to gather the intelligence, to find your targets, and then to perpetrate the attacks. It's a pretty low cost, low risk, high reward for attackers. So let's look at just a couple forms of email attacks that are out there. So I always like to start with wire transfers. These are probably ones that everybody has seen. Got a couple sample emails up there. I'm sure every single person in the room and online has had these type of attacks that have hit their organization. They're easy to send. They have significantly higher payouts because you're getting an invoice paid or something like that. The one problem with them is bad guys have to use money mules. You're not using crypto or things like that with a wire transfer. And it sometimes takes a little bit longer to get the payout. Some good known attack types, Facebook and Google were hit with a Lithuanian attacker that hit them up for about 150 million worth of fake invoices back in 2015, I believe. And, we see these all the time. My last job, I probably had 5 or 6 of these that got close to getting paid. Luckily, we had some other controls in place that stopped it last minute, but they're very convincing. Even the best trained accounts payable teams are, oftentimes fall for these type of attacks. Another example that it isn't quite as common, but it's very effective is we call it the aging reports. It's really a social engineering attempt to get, victim A to provide, personal sensitive information about their customers or clients. And then the attacker then takes that information and says, hey, I'm so-and-so pretending to be victim A. You owe us, $86,000 for an invoice. We changed our bank account. Can you please settle up? And the victim sees that, hey, this person knows exactly how much we owe them. They know that we do business with them. And so it's very convincing. It leverages all those key triggers from a social engineering aspect to really get the victim to fall for it and say, hey, this must be that person because they have all this inside information that outsiders wouldn't normally have. So why are socially engineered attacks so dangerous? What we're seeing just in our own research is that whenever these social engineered attacks are hitting customers and companies in general, there's a 50% increase in employment engagement when they get these type of attacks. And why aren't they being stopped? Well, obviously these attacks don't have a payload. There's no links. They're not trying to get someone to click here. They're not trying to install malware. It's just simple text. Also, human nature is to want to be helpful. There's a whole psychology behind social engineering. People want to be helpful. They want to do the right thing. Nobody wants to be that company that's not paying their bills on time. And so just the mere fact of human nature and wanting to trust and wanting to be helpful gets people to engage with attackers and ultimately make those transfers. And then ultimately, there's an implicit trust. If I'm pretending to be a company and I can build that trust that you think it's the actual company that you deal with, there's that level of putting your guard down because, hey, I know I do business with this company, so that must be legitimate versus the opportunistic, hey, I'm whatever bank and please click here because your account's frozen. Well, if I don't do business with that bank, I'm not going to fall for that. But what we're seeing in these situations is these are companies that organizations deal with, and so there's that implicit trust. So here's a real attack that we stopped, and just to kind of highlight some of the things here, you look at it, and this is a different type of attack, and we'll go over this a little bit more detail. This is a vendor email compromise, and so we all have vendors and suppliers in our supply chain that we deal with. Unfortunately, there are times where they don't have the same level of security. Maybe they're not using multi-factor authentication. Maybe they don't have a full dedicated security team or IT team. And so attackers are able to compromise them probably through password spray attacks or even social engineering. They take over the account. They look through the sent folder. They see, hey, this guy that I just victimized does, business with realcompany.com. I know they normally talk about payments with Steve, so I'm going to just turn around and send a message from the compromised account. I'm going to ask Steve to, go ahead and transfer this money. I'm going to give him a different bank account, and off he goes. Well, back to all the training and awareness that we tell all of our end users, hey, look for spoof domains, look for fake domains, look for misspellings. And in situations like this, these are actually attackers that are, using a legitimate email and a legitimate email of someone that your company does business with. And so all those checks and flags that we tell users to look for, they're not there. And we're seeing a lot of loss, and we're seeing an increase in these type of vendor email compromises. So from our research, we've seen 61% of organizations receive at least one vendor email compromise attack in a quarter. The average cost of a vendor email compromise is $183,000. And the largest one that we've observed is a $1.6 million loss. And then I love to throw in the SolarWinds quote there, because even though SolarWinds ultimately was a different type of attack, it still started, tip of the spear was still an email issue where they ultimately compromised their environment through a phishing email. So, just another visual representation of why these type of attacks, these social engineering attacks, these vendor email compromise attacks bypass traditional email defenses. One, there's that trust, and two, the common traditional defenses of a secure email gateway that's looking for known bad. These are email addresses that are used once and stood up and then no longer used. And so the whole concept of a block list really doesn't come into play, because you're only going to see it once and you'll never see it again. Even if you're subscribing to threat intelligence feeds from other organizations and ISACs, that attacker is targeting you. They're targeting you once, and then they're going to burn down that account. A lot of these accounts we're seeing from Gmail and Office 365, they're leveraging a lot of that implicit trust just within the cloud email environment. I know if I'm going after a victim that is Office 365, the best way to do that is to leverage another Office 365 account. Unfortunately, it's pretty easy for them to set it up. And, by the time Microsoft is on to them using it for fraudulent purposes, they've moved on to another one. And then when you look at the threats that a SEG really is good at and what it's not good at, it's great at malware, it's great at spam, it's horrible with business email compromise, vendor account compromise or account takeovers, and even that east-west type of attack where, maybe one of your own users has been compromised and now the bad guy is similar to the vendor email compromise. They're leveraging that internal account to try to compromise and socially engineer other employees within your organization. So I've talked a lot about the problems and, paint all the doom and gloom of how bad the situation is. And, that's backed up with what the FBI and you can look and see all the different various attacks that end up in the news. So I'd be remiss without talking about the answer. And I'll talk more generally about the answer, not just with what abnormal security can do to solve the problem, but just, what we should be looking at in a modern email security solution. But first, I'm just going to kind of talk about abnormal security as a company. So, we are a cloud native email security platform. We protect organizations that leverage Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace. We protect a lot of Fortune 100 companies. Our largest deployment is 600,000 mailboxes. We scale for large enterprises. We also have small and medium-sized companies that we protect as well. Our backbone and our team DNA comes from not only security companies like Proofpoint, Palo Alto, Carbon Black, but also a lot of artificial intelligence, machine learning companies, Google, Amazon, Twitter. Our founders came from Twitter. They actually owned a ad tech company that was good at machine learning and behavior analytics. And so Twitter purchased them in 2015. They went to Twitter, spent some time helping develop Twitter's behavioral targeted ad product. and then they decided, hey, let's go do something different. Let's solve a bigger problem in the world than targeted ads, and let's see if there's a mission that we can do to stop cyber criminals and fraud that's perpetrated on lots of companies out there. Just a couple of the logos that we do protect today. And so when you look at abnormal security, and really even a lot of there's other modern email security organizations out there as well, we connect fully into the API of your O365 or your Google environment. And so there's no MX record changes, there's no rerouting your email. It's a simple plugin through Microsoft or the Google API that they publish. And we're able to leverage our machine learning to help determine when there's an attack and when the email is normal. And so we operate in two different types of scenarios. We operate where a customer still leverages a traditional SEG and they use abnormal on top of Microsoft 365 to be an additional enhancement. What we're finding is any SEG customer that we're working with, they're missing upwards of 20-25% of these type of attacks that are getting through their defenses with their product. So we're kind of that extra layer that takes them up to where they're stopping these type of attacks. And then we do have some organizations, and we do offer a scenario where people don't leverage a SEG. They point straight to Microsoft or Google for their MX record, and they leverage any native email security tooling or controls within Microsoft or Google. And then we sit on top of that to provide that extra layer of protection against these targeted attacks. So I mentioned this attack earlier. I had a different view on it, but I wanted to kind of show you how Abnormal would look at this attack and the different things that we would call out on it. And so, back to the original email, Abnormal will highlight the things in the body of the email and certain attributes and metadata around the headers to kind of uncover abnormal behaviors. It'll look and see, hey, maybe this login attempt or this login for John at Real Vendor, maybe it came from Germany, and all the other times we've seen this before, it was coming from the US. And so that's something that's out of the ordinary. In and of itself, it's not a reason to flag it as malicious, but it's an indicator that something's not right here. Additionally, looking at the language in the email, there's we've got an action or a request to engage with the victim. We've got to ask for money. We've got asking for personal information. We're looking for a payment. We've got a new bank coming on. And then maybe there's something weird with this signature of the fake, the vendor email compromised attacker. That's not how John normally signs his name. Maybe he just signs it John. And so all of these things ultimately come up and create a risk score. And so we look at these and we say, okay, all of these 50,000 signals about this email indicate that this is a malicious email. It's not really John at realvendor.com. It's an attacker that's using John at realvendor.com's email. And so let's stop it and prevent it from getting to the user's inbox. And so, when we look at all these things, I think things like, security awareness training, it absolutely plays a part. I think, phishing your own users and doing the phishing simulations, all of those things make up a really good overall security program strategy. I think the problem is those by themselves aren't a good primary control because, what do you do in a situation like this where this is an account that's been taken? And, this is, I'm getting an echo. Sorry. All right. And so, while I highly recommend, people still do awareness training, phishing simulations, all those things, at the end of the day, I kind of like to say, it's great to do those, but if I'm asking my users to make the right choice 10 times, or am I asking my users to make the right choice 2 or 3 times? And I'd always rather stack the odds in my favor and have my users maybe have to make a choice once or twice versus 10 or 20 times. Because, nature is that at some point they're going to get it wrong. At some point, I saw a situation in my last organization where it just so happened that the attacker had compromised one of our vendors. We had just paid the vendor, within the last couple of days. They took over the account. They sent the email back to the AP person. They said, hey, I know you just paid us, but we just changed our bank account information and that payment didn't go all the way through. Can you please just resubmit it with this new bank account? And so even though they knew, hey, anytime we're asked to change bank account, we need to pick up the phone and call a person, they thought to themselves, hey, we just paid them. This has got to be legitimate because I just had this conversation. So oops, our bad. We didn't realize that, you changed your bank account information. Let me resubmit it. And, those type of attacks are highly effective because even though my AP department had a process in place to go out of band to verify, because that attacker came at it with a sense of urgency and, they wanted to be a good corporate citizen. And we had just had the conversation with them about payments. They thought, okay, I don't need to worry about that extra process. I can just go ahead straight to, resubmitting this invoice. And, that's at the end of the day, one of the other problems with a wire transfer is once it goes out the door, you have a very short period of time to do anything about it. And, once it's out, it's gone. So I don't know, I think Gopal from Auto Club Group is there. One of the things that we were going to do is, have him talk about his experiences with Abnormal in our remaining time. He's a customer of Abnormal's, and I thought it would be great just to, hear straight from a customer. I know I was a customer, but now that I'm on the vendor side, people are always more skeptical of hearing from a vendor. And so if Gopal is there and he's available to talk and be seen and heard, I'd love to get his, for the remaining 10, 15 minutes, I'd love to get his view on what his problems were in his organization, how he got to know Abnormal Security and came across the solution, and then really, what are some of his experiences been with Abnormal as a partner.
Hey, I'm Gopal Padinjarvittil. I'm the CISO at Auto Club Group, which is the brand is AAA. And we have been using Abnormal for about 1 year. So you've heard the platform and all those things. So we use both Proofpoint and Abnormal. We have been a Proofpoint customer for a long time. And we did have a BEC incident, which is quite normal. And so we are looking at what can be done, because it's the nature of BEC, as you can see on that, there's an example, right? So there's no links, there's no attachment. The vendor account gets compromised, and the bad guys would impersonate a CFO or somebody and send an email saying that, hey, I'll give you what happened in that example. So they said, we are having an auditing, somebody's auditing us, so we are having some problem. And can you send the invoices? We'll give you a new bank information. Can you send the invoices to this new bank? And there is a bank in Hong Kong. And my procurement and team said, no, we don't do business with Hong Kong. We can't do a wire transfer to Hong Kong. They said, fine, we'll look at that. So this email is actually coming from the CFO. And nobody actually called and asked, hey, did you send it? But because, people change bank accounts, right? So, and then silence for a long time. And then after a month or so ago, they came back and said, hey, can you send it to a Comerica account? and the procurement, and like, I mean, we know this guy. We've been working with this person for a long time, so there's no reason for us not to believe, because it is his actual email. So it's not like a spoofed email or something. It's actually coming from his own email. So there's no reasons to people to call. They said, okay, send the W-2 form, or the form that, there's a form to change the bank information. Send the bank information, and they go and change the system, and the invoices getting started paid to that Comerica account. And Comerica, just like any other bank, they look at fraud, right? So I get a call saying that we found a guy, Roshan Tucker, who lives in Pontiac, who never had more than $100 in his account. We are seeing huge amounts, hundreds of thousands of dollars coming. And so we called this guy and asked, what is your relationship with AAA? Why are you getting this much money? And he couldn't answer the question. So immediately they knew that this was a money mule scheme. So he was being used. So they actually blocked the account. They called us, and right. So we started investigating. Luckily, we were able to recover the information. We went back and looked at the BEC, and it's very different from your normal phishing, because normal phishing is come here, click the link, download the malware. The help breaks loose, right? So this has got a longer window, and if you look at the FinCEN Crime Center and all those things, they give the anatomy of a BEC attack. So it happens over a long time, and when we started investigating, there's a lot of people in that email loop, and nobody really understood that this guy is. And then we started investigating. We called the guy and said, no, I don't know. And looks like his email was compromised. The vendors were going in, they were going and sending the email on his behalf. They were monitoring this email. They were going to the sent email and deleting the email, right? So it's a very kind of a very difficult for humans to actually get hold of and see this. It's a very difficult email. And we were able to recover the money because the account was blocked, and we were able to recover some money. At least, most of the money we were able to recover. So that is when we started looking at, because we were aware of BECs before as a CISO. And right, so when you have a real incident, that's when you get this. So that's where we were looking at who is the, like Proofpoint, they really didn't have. So you need to be looking at account takeover, ATO, and vendor email compromise, and BEC. This all goes hand in hand. So all this need to happen before a successful BEC can be launched, right? So we are looking at who can do this, and that's when Abnormal came, and we did a proof of concept, and they did find. So we found that there's a lot of things that. So this is typical linkless attack, and they look at the email patterns, how we have been. There's a learning curve, and they look at. So if I'm writing, there's a typical style that I'll write, capitalization or grammar or something. They're able to figure out and warn, hey, you have never got this email from this person, or this looks suspicious, right? So there's some magic sauce they have to warn, be careful about this particular email, this is not, right? So that's why I think we have been using both Proofpoint and Abnormal. I'll pause there. I'll take any questions you may have on our experience. So I gave you why, and I would recommend that if you don't wait for something to happen before, because there's a lot of data around how many trillions of dollars or billions of dollars are being lost in BEC attacks. So all this information is out there, and once the money is gone, the money is gone, right? I mean, so.
Yeah, so I have a question for you, Gopal.
Yeah.
This is Mike. So how long did it take to set up the proof of value with abnormal? Was it a pretty rigorous, long process? And did you have to change your mail flow or add anything into your environment?
No, a couple of days. So I think that's so we had acquired two different entities. So we were able to set up a connection because we anyway you need to be in because we are in Office 365. Because if you're on premise Exchange, it becomes a little more challenging. But we are on Office 365 and connecting Office 365 and Abnormal. I mean, it was pretty easy. And then we ran the proof of concept for 2 weeks because to see what's happening, and then there was a readout and report, and we were able to compare: did Proofpoint catch it, right? So, or did it slip through, right? So we were able to do a comparison on that. So it was pretty easy. I mean, it was not. It's like it's probably. I mean, they'd say it's a couple of hours, but I would say a day or two.
Yeah, so I'll just chime in here too, because I put it in place in about a 15,000 employee environment. To do the POV, it's literally click a link, put in some admin credentials, not because it requires admin credentials, but that's just a safety requirement for Office 365 or Google, and off you go into just a pure read-only mode. And so depending on how fast you type, it could be done in as little as 2 to 3 minutes. The nice thing too is Abnormal will come back and they will tell you, here's all of the attacks that we would have stopped if we would have been in place to block it. And so it's just really a good visual on all of the things that, you know, all of the things your existing controls are missing and what Abnormal would stop. I think the other nice thing too is, you know, we get some of these other solutions that throw warning banners out to users to say, hey, be careful here. Part of the problem with those type of solutions is people become kind of blind to those banners after a while. I used to do phishing simulations and let the banner pick it up, and people would still click on it even though it was pretending to be internal and with a big external warning banner. So the other nice thing is our Abnormal solution really just takes it out of the user's inbox. It's not there to be seen, not there to be, you know, thought about, and you know, it's just a highly effective solution to really take that opportunity away from the end user to even have to figure out, hey, is this legit or is this a malicious email?
Yeah, and I think I said the 2 days because we are a 100-year-old company. We have bureaucratic processes. So there is some procedural hurdles that has to be gone through before we could set up the account, right? It's not, if you guys are flexible, that's a different, but we have some procedural hurdles to go through to get these things done, including some MSAs and legal agreements and all those things, right? So.
All right. Well, this has been really good. You know, we really like the customer testimonials. You know, we get a lot of vendors in here talking. We love the vendors. Love all you vendors. But we really like the customer testimonials. So appreciate that. So thanks for for that presentation. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to take a brief pause. So the people in the room, there is a bunch of food over here. So we want you to get up and get some of this food. For the people online, just go raid your kitchen or something and come back in about 4 minutes. So we're going to get going in about 4 minutes. It's going to be me and Jack talking CISO stuff. So make your way back here in about 4 minutes. Thanks.
As expected. The money. Money. So we see that months past. Yeah. So, great job. Great job.
All right, we're back. I feel like I'm at a roller rink or something. And we're back. All right, so if we could all grab a seat and, man, it's a rowdy crowd tonight. I'm waiting for water bottles to get thrown up here. All right, so I was informed that I did a really bad introduction, so I'm actually Earl Doobie. I'm the president of the CSA Detroit. So that's who I am, in case you were wondering. And then over there we have Eric doing the audio video. So all of this that you see here is compliments of Eric. And way back in the back we have Za, who is one of our board members. And I think that's it for board members. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to spend about 45 minutes, Jack and I talking, and he'll introduce himself here in a second. And we're just going to have a little fireside chat without the fire. But there will be plenty of snow later, so that might give it a little bit more ambiance. Yeah, and don't pay any attention to that free advertising right there. All right, so let's get started. Jack, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what brought you here tonight?
Sure, thanks, Earl. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. Hate these microphones. Jack Miller. I run professional services for Menlo Security, and I've been there for a couple of years. But going back my career, I spent the majority of it as a CISO. I did 16 years at 4 enterprises. I was a CISO for 2 of the largest counties in the country, and then for 2 large insurance companies that you would all know if I named them. But it's on my LinkedIn, so you can look there and see. But, after working as a CISO for so many years, it's frustrating. You lose a little bit of your brain every day, and it's a really tough job. And burnout is a really big thing. And I think as an industry, we need to work to address that, because we're going to have a lot more, I think, exodus, people leaving the industry right now. So after 16 years, I got too frustrated. I couldn't take it anymore. I left. I went to the VC world, worked for Norwest Venture Partners in the Bay Area, and then from there transitioned over to some of their startups. Here I am today at Menlo. I actually was an advisor for Menlo going back to 2015. So kind of had a long road with Menlo, and when an opportunity came in there, a very different type of role, running professional services, but having done so many projects myself on the receiving end and seeing how easy it is for them to go bad, right? How many people in here can say that 100% of their deployments have been very successful? I didn't ask how many people can say that 0% have been very successful, but we know that number's pretty low. And so, thought coming in with the customer's viewpoint and understanding the challenges that they face and what's really important to them, that we could build out a team that could be more effective. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years.
All right, good. So let's talk about cloud security. That's why we're here. So explain a little bit how Menlo works in cloud and what you guys are doing to help secure the cloud environment.
Yeah, so when Earl and I were talking earlier, I asked him the question because he mentioned cloud security, and I said, so for purposes of this question, are you saying cloud security from the standpoint of securing your assets in the cloud, or are you saying cloud security because from the standpoint of being a security vendor that provides their product via the cloud? From my perspective, it's securing your assets in the cloud. I was happy that Earl had the same perspective, right? It's I wouldn't say at Menlo that we're focused on securing your cloud assets. I think that the cloud has introduced another bigger challenge than your stuff in the cloud, and it's the fact that now you're losers. That was a Freudian slip right there, right? Your users are everywhere, and they're accessing everything very differently. And how do you know what they're doing, when they're doing, and where they're going, right? And that's, it's a huge hole, right? I mean, everything today looks like shadow IT compared to 10 years ago when it was really easy when everything was on-prem, right? So it's a big struggle. There's always the solace in if you're with a SaaS provider, there's so many other customers that are with them as well that if they have a breach, that it's so much bigger than you don't have to worry about it. And I know that may sound counter-security intuitive, but it's really an important point. If you're going to go with a cloud provider, go with ones that if they get breached, your name will be way down in the bottom under a lot of big fish, right? And I know that seems crazy, but when you think about it as a CISO or as a security person, your job is to manage the risk for your organization. So going back many years ago, an organization that processed many, many credit cards, tier 1 merchant, and we were looking at moving to tokenization because we wanted to eliminate our cardholder data environment. There were some new technologies, new companies that had really compelling products that looked really interesting, and then there was First Data. And First Data's TransArmor, for anybody here that knows it, wasn't the best option out there. But First Data already had our data because they were our processor. So if they had a breach, we were going to lose our data anyway. And they were the largest tokenization provider in the world. So again, if they had a breach, the other people that were going to be in the news were going to far surpass me. So, you know, I don't know if it's like the...
Well, that's an interesting concept. That's like blending into the herd. So you're saying, hey, if you're out on the plain and you have some lions lurking around, you just want to get into the middle of the herd so that you're not the bigger target out there. So that's kind of the risk management strategy.
Yeah, or the bear, right? As long as I can run faster than you, I'm not worried about the bear. But it's interesting because I found that in all my years as a CISO, I would often go home and I would laugh with myself, my wife, my team members that I was kind of like the anti-security person in the organization, right? Everyone wants to use security as a tool. And they all spin it to mean lots of different things that can be good for them or bad for them, right? I hope I'm not in a room full of internal auditors, but internal auditors are the perfect example of that, right? And so it's, what is the right thing to do to protect your company? And if there's technologies you can implement or processes you can implement that can eliminate the risk, that's great. But if you can't eliminate all the risk, then surrounding yourself with people that have more risk than you do.
So speaking of risk, what do you think is the biggest risk that people need to worry about when coming to cloud security? Like, if all these people are migrating to AWS and Azure and Google Cloud, and what do you think is the number one thing that they should be looking out for? That's a surprise question, obviously. I gave him a list of questions ahead of time, and that wasn't on it.
It's tough, right? And it's really tough when you're a CISO because you're giving control of your destiny to somebody else. And you can do all the vendor risk management assessments that you want to do, but those are all a point in time. And at the end of the day, you don't know what they're doing all the time to protect your data and what their people are doing, right? So it is a huge risk. And you can do the assessments, you can have the proper contract language in place, you can have liability insurance, right? Cyber insurance. But what good is that going to do you when your company's name is on the front page of the papers? Of course, I guess we don't have papers anymore. When your company's name is on the front page of the internet, you get the loss. One way or another, you get the loss, right? So it's...
Yeah, I mean, there's only so many ways that you can protect yourself. There's a contract, so you got to make sure you do contract management. There's a SOC report, so you can kind of tell what they're doing from an application standpoint. And if you're relying on a SOC, make sure that you're not getting the AWS SOC. Make sure you're actually getting a SOC for the application itself. And then there's
it's got to be a SOC 2 type 2.
Right. So yeah, I mean, there's really not a lot of tools that you have available to you. But the thing that I really think companies overlook is, yeah, you can do the contract review and you can look at the SOC 2 reports, but the thing that I think a lot of companies miss is you got to have the internal people that can actually configure that application and configure that cloud service so that you're not leaving all of this data exposed. And I just see a lot of companies where they try to take the legacy support staff that they have, whether it's the guy that was running the mainframe or the AS400 or the lady that was doing, you know, client server environments, and they say, hey, now you're the cloud engineer or you're the cloud architect. And they have no idea like all the capabilities that AWS has or all the configurations that are in Azure, you know, and I think that is where a lot of the risk is at. And when you look at all these buckets that are being exposed, those are totally on the fault of the company, the way that the system is set up right now, because everything's defaulted to easy to use, which is, you know, part of the problem is, you know, they're not giving you hardened, you know, services. They're giving you easy to use services and then expecting you to go, you know, harden that stuff. And the companies aren't investing in the right skill sets to harden those environments.
Yeah, so I think you touched on a really interesting point. But when we talk about the cloud, that's really big. It means a lot of different things, right? It ranges from infrastructure as a service to an application as a service that's fully delivered and everything in between, right? And so, you know, an infrastructure as a service perspective, you know, for instance, if you're doing database as a service, there's companies out there now that offer polymorphic encryption that allows you to encrypt your data in a way that the infrastructure as a service provider, the people that have the SA accounts in the database can't access or view your data, but they can still run scripts against it, right? So I think to your point, at the end of the day, once you're using another company to do stuff for you, you have to realize that is the point that's going to get attacked, and how do you protect yourself against that company, whether it's against negligence or whether it's against you know, malfeasance or whatever it might be, and make sure you're going with a company that's protecting your stuff at the same time, right? There's nothing easy about this path. It's a difficult path.
No, I think, you know, when a lot of companies go into the cloud, it's almost like, hey, we're just going to put it up there and then we don't have to worry about it anymore. But I don't know how many of you have seen the Kronos thing that's happened. You know, these are thousands of companies who put their payroll and their time and attendance and everything with that provider, and, you know, it took them a month and a half to get their service back up and available. So, like, what do you do? You know, when you are totally turning it over, what's your backup plan? What's your contingency plan? At least if you have an on-prem solution, you know, you can build failover in there, or you can say, like, we have this data center in Germany and we have this data center in Detroit, and if the Detroit data center gets hit, we just fail over to Germany. You know, what do you do when your cloud service provider goes down? You know, and a lot of companies are struggling with that right now, and they had to go into like manual procedures with, you know, to replace their time and attendance, and you know, and that's for something simple like time and attendance. Think about something that's doing logistics, or, you know, something along those lines. Where, what is your manual process?
Yeah, I worked for a company that used Kronos. I'm glad I was gone before all that happened, but it's the exit strategy, right? Get in, do your job, and retire before anything happens.
All right, I think he's trying to answer a question I didn't even ask. I didn't even ask a question. So, you know, in terms of, you know, cloud services and, you know, just managing all that risk, what do you think the CISO's biggest role is in that? Is it, you know, they need to vet every cloud service, they need to review every contract? What role do you think that a security person should play in how the company is procuring software as a service or any other, you know, as a service type of an offering?
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, you own the risk. The company owns the risk. You can never You can insure it, you can try to transfer it, you can do what you want to do, but you own the risk. And as a CISO, you really need to treat it no differently than if it was an on-prem application. You know, some applications you can get the source code for and you can review. Other applications you can't, right? So all the best you can do is get maybe like the SOC 2 Type 2 or some other audit that they had done, right? It's, you know, it varies what you're going to be able to get from those companies. It varies what is the importance to the business. How soon does it have to be done? How much does it affect the revenue? I don't know. At the end of the day, I think from a CISO's perspective is you've got to treat it exactly like it's on-prem and you own it.
But how did you get yourself into that position? So like with an on-prem solution, you know there's going to be a huge project associated with that. So you can get inserted into the PMO process so that every time a new project comes in there, you're kind of reviewing it. When you look at a software as a service, for sure, there doesn't even have to be a project associated with that. There just needs to be a PO and a, you know, and a contract, and boom, you have a cloud service. So how would you structure yourself in there? Like for me, I went to legal and I said, hey, look, anytime you sign a contract that is for an as a service type of an offering, whether it's IaaS or SaaS or whatever, I have to approve that contract. So I review the contract. We have standard security clauses that we put in there, and then we go back and forth and argue for months about that. So it's actually sometimes takes longer to implement a cloud service than an on-prem because of all the terms that you have to negotiate back and forth and all the red lines that you're sharing between your legal team and the other legal team to get some protections in there. Because if you take the vendor's paper, you're opening yourself up to a whole world of hurt because that paper is all skewed towards the service provider.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why that's where I kind of put my path in there. Is said, look, I want to see all those contracts. So
right, and that's what I was saying is that everything is shadow IT now, right? So if we go back 10 years, we go back 30 years, right? There wasn't shadow IT because how many people went out and set up their own mainframe? But then 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we started having a lot of this, right? And it was always the marketing department and HR, right? Those were the two offenders who were always running out and signing up for some sort of technology that IT didn't vet, right? And now with the cloud, right, it's exponentially worse, right? So the advantage is that we know better today, so we can put the hooks in like you're talking about. Whether that's using procurement, right? That was where I put my hooks in, or whether that's with legal or something like that, because the contract has to get signed. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the cloud services are small enough that they don't even take a contract. Nobody signs it. They accept, they put in their credit card number and they accept the conditions, right? So you've got to be really, really, really tightly integrated with your procurement department, because at the end of the day, everything has to go through them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so, luckily, we've gotten it to the point where procurement won't sign any deals until, the contract is approved by legal, which then in turn can't do anything until I, approve the contract. So you do have to get those three groups working together closely. So anybody that doesn't have that relationship going, you need to start working on that, because if you don't, there's a whole bunch of shadow IT popping up in your organization. And so you got to get in there and get a view of that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sucks, right? That's the metamorphosis of the CISO role, right? Is that now you're contracts administrator, partner manager, right? And you're doing all this administrative stuff that isn't maybe the fun stuff that you got into security for in the first place, right? Compliance.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I spend more time with lawyers than I actually do with people in IT. So let's talk about that a little bit more, because as I talk to a lot of people at different stages in their career, by and large, if you ask someone in security what they want to do with their life, it's like, I want to be the CISO. I want to be the CISO. and I asked him, like, why do you want to be the CISO? Do you even understand what it means to be the CISO? And like, well, no, but you get to tell everyone what to do or whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, that's part of it, but I'm also responsible for everything that all those people do. But, let's talk a little bit about, some advice that you have for maybe some college students that, are thinking about getting into a security career, and just, what lies ahead of them and things they should be thinking about.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I remember, my first CISO role was with the County of Orange in Southern California, so the 5th largest county in the country. And that's going back to 2000 when I started there. We'd go places all the time. My wife and I, we'd talk to people. What do you do? Well, I'm a CISO. What is that, right? And I'd have to explain it. Nobody knew. Nobody had a clue.
My wife still has no clue what I do.
Well, my wife figured it out. She would tell people I was a politician, right? Because at the end of the day, that's kind of what you are as a CISO. You're trying to coerce, right? You're trying to manipulate, right? Whatever you're doing, you're trying to get people to do actions that you want them to do that they weren't thinking were necessarily the best actions that they wanted to take. You have to convince them why those are the right actions to take and show how it's aligned and get them on board, but you are very much of a politician at the end of the day. But it's just been, anyway, really interesting to see the progression over the years where, I remember the first big change was when the Target breach happened. And after the Target breach, everywhere I would go, right, people would start asking me about it. And before that, right, well, what do you do? Well, I'm in, charge of security for this organization and blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. And they'd move on to talk about something else. Then the Target breach happened, and everybody wanted to know about it, right? And everybody suddenly started to become a lot more in tune to security and a lot more concerned about it. And now you turn on the TV and you see commercials for CISO programs at schools. I mean, it's amazing, right? And I was really fortunate. And had I been 20 years later, right, I don't know that I'd be sitting here right now. I mean, timing is a lot of everything. The timing for me was perfect when I got into it, and I rode the shit out of that wave, right? But I guess looking back, and we have an SE here tonight from Menlo, and I was talking to him earlier, and I was saying, I realized over the years that I strayed. This is my advice. Become an SE. It's the best freaking job there is, right? I mean, you can make really good money. You can work for a startup and you can get equity. You come in, and unlike a CISO, everybody listens to you as the expert and believes what you have to say. And you don't have all the stress. I mean, look, CISO's a cool job, and you can do a lot of cool shit. But it's a really tough job, and it's a really lonely job, and it's often a really thankless job. In all my years as a CISO, I reported to the CIO. And I know there's been so much debate over all the years about where you should report. And I'll tell you this, it doesn't matter where you report. It matters who you report to. And if you report to a good CIO that understands it and gets it, that's better than reporting to a bad CEO or CFO or CRO or legal, that doesn't get it. So I've always had a good CIO, so I've been fortunate. But when I would sit in the leadership meetings of the CIO, right, with his direct reports, all the other direct reports had like a small area of responsibility. Like, well, this person has client services. This person has open systems. This person has the mainframe, right, or applications, whatever it is. They all had very finite areas. And I was the one person sitting at the table that was responsible for all of their areas. And so you get pulled into every conversation on every technology with every team. And at the end of the day, you have skin in the game that if stuff goes bad, you're potentially held accountable and responsible for it. And no one else at that table has that. So that's why these events, I was talking to somebody earlier and saying that the best thing ever of being a CISO is the community. And I spent those 16 years in Southern California. I could go back and go to a security meeting there tomorrow, and I would walk in and I would see 100 people that I've known for the last 20 years. And it's coming to these meetings. You know, you don't come to these meetings to listen to me. You come to these meetings to talk with each other and network, right? And find out what are you doing and what's working for you and what's not working for you and what have you tried. And maybe there's a lot of other jobs you can have where you have that kind of network and support group. I don't know, because I've spent my career as a CISO. But for me, that was by far the best thing of being a CISO.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, that's great advice for anybody coming up through security is you really have to build that network because, you know, like Eric over there, you know, didn't know him, but, you know, we became connected through CSA. You know, so it's going to these types of events, it's meeting people and, you know, standing in the back and drinking free beer and talking to people. You know, this is what is really important. And I look at a lot of the young people, and you never see them go to like ISACA meetings or CSA meetings. You know, we're trying to get more young people out to these things for exactly that reason. If you can start your network early in your career, those people will help you, you know, rise up throughout your career. You know, most of the job I have at Lear, I got that because I wasn't at Lear at the time, but someone in Lear said, hey, you know, we need some help with security. Do you want to come over here and help us with security? You know, and so it's the network that gets you the leverage to kind of keep rising up there. And it's also who keeps you sane when you're putting up with all the craziness that, you know, we have to put up with. Because like you said, you know, even in security, if you're coming up in security, you're responsible for, you know, incident response, or you're responsible for vulnerability management, or you're responsible for disaster recovery, or you're responsible for, you know, some slice of that security pie that's out there. Mm-hmm. When you get to the CISO seat, you're responsible for all of that. You know, and so I think people that, you know, kind of come up a narrow path, you know, and they just do one thing and then somehow they end up at the CISO role, you know, because there's a vacancy and they need to fill it or whatever. I think that puts them at a disadvantage versus someone who has actually moved around, you know, in the various roles inside that security team that understands, you know, hey, those incident response guys, they might be late on Monday because they've been working all night, you know, on Saturday and Sunday working on something, you know, and maybe people need to understand, you know, how the compliance team is working with the auditors to solve a big problem, you know, and so I think it helps to move around and not just kind of stay in one pillar of a security team so that you have that broader perspective.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because based on what you just said, I want to add to what I previously said, that it's not just the other technology leaders that report to the CIO, right? You're responsible for securing every business line. How many business leaders in your companies fully understand how the other business lines and business units work? Right? They don't. They stay in their own little area. So it's not even just from the security and technology perspective, but it's even then now you go into a company, right, a new company, and you're expected to understand every one of their business units and what they do and how they do it, right? I mean, you know, I was responsible for securing the leasing of narrow body passenger jets. I don't know anything about that business. Right? I mean, it's just kind of crazy stuff that comes at you that you've got to learn about. So if you don't already have a good appreciation and understanding of all the different technical areas and the security issues, how are you going to learn all the business issues at the company that you're working for?
No,
so
that's exactly
totally
right.
Agree.
You know, if you go talk to you know, anyone in a security team, you just ask them, what does the business make? You know, you'd be amazed at how many people down in the trenches don't actually even understand what the product lines are that your company, you know, produces. And so I would say, you know, anyone that is looking to move up as an executive or whatever inside of a company is, you know, you need to read that 10K report every year, that annual report, understand what your company is doing, understand how the segments are aligned, because there's a lot of risk out there. Yeah. And you think about just like a manufacturing company, if you don't understand, you know, where certain things are just in time versus batch, or where things are using heavy reliance on EDI transactions or things like that, you don't even understand that there is technology risk on the shop floor, you know,
Yeah.
and running those business lines. And so just more advice to people that are, trying to move up is, understand your business, read your annual report so that you understand. And the good thing about the annual report is it tells you right in there what your company thinks are the most important risks to the organization.
Right.
So now you can look at that and go like, holy cow, my company thinks the number one risk to our organization is cyber risk. That's pretty powerful stuff if you're, in security, is to say, this is how important the job we're doing is, that the company recognizes that risk is that important. And you need to kind of work through that whole risk list and find out all the things that are related to information or related to technology, and that's how you can prove more value to your company.
Yeah, and you've got to stay grounded, right? You've got to be the person that doesn't, run around screaming that the roof's on fire, right? Because that's what you
for
get.
sure. That's the
what
quickest
you
way
get
to ruin your
surrounded with.
career, is to chicken little your job.
Well, that's what internal audit's for.
Hey, Eric, what time we got over there? 6:23. Yeah, let's take that question. Right there, we will ask our esteemed guest.
Sure. So the question was, what was my path to become a CISO? For me and for Earl. I bought a lottery ticket and won? No. Look, it was a different world back then, right? It was, I got into tech. It was interesting. I got into technology, right? A lot of people here that are younger, that are starting their careers, right, would be really jealous of the story I'll tell, right? That I was at a point in my career where I was looking for something different to do, and thought I would go into technology, and I went to New Horizons to get my MCSE, right? I don't even know if those exist anymore. And in that 3-month period where I was cranking through doing my MCSE, and I thought my plan was that I was going to become a Microsoft contract trainer, because I didn't want to sit in front of a computer every day, but I like to talk. Maybe I don't do it well, but I like to talk. And so that was my path I was going to go down. And I started taking all these classes, and this was during the dot-com boom. And I would go places, and whenever I would talk to anybody and tell them what I was doing, and I'd mention technology, they were always like, oh, hey, I've got a problem, can you help me with it? And they always turned out to be security problems. And so I started my own security company. And I did that for a few years, and the dot-com crash came, and everything came crashing down. And, a lot of it's timing. And I was in the right place at the right time. A lot of you here probably don't remember the company ISS, but I was a big partner for ISS, and the local ISS guy who came from PwC, I'll see how many acronyms I can throw out, he knew the CIO at the County of Orange, and they were looking for somebody to come in and build a security program for them. And this was 99, and I was in the right place, and I went in and built their security program, became their first CISO. So I think the path may still exist today, but as a lot of companies have become more mature now, and a lot more are adding security teams and CISOs, I don't know that path exists anymore for many people.
Yeah, I don't think there is a defined path. You think that all the companies out there, only a handful of them, relatively speaking, have a CISO. And of those companies that have a CISO, there's only one. So I think luck and being in the right place at the right time plays a lot in it. There's very few CISOs that are so high profile that people are like, yeah, I want that person to come be my CISO.
I was fortunate. I left the County of Orange. My second job, corporate information security officer for Pacific Life Insurance Company. I worked for Mickey Krause. And that was just again, I'm looking at the age of people in here. There's some people that know the name Mickey Krause. Maybe there's a lot that don't, right? But the opportunity being in Southern California and to get to work with Mickey Krause and get to know Hal Tipton and other people like that and get some mentors.
Man, you're throwing out some old timers on that one.
Boeing, man, that was Southern California security. It all comes from Boeing.
Wow. So yeah, I would say, you know, like my path, I started out in internal audit. You know, I was an auditor, and I wasn't even doing IT audit. I was doing financial audit. My degrees are in economics and accounting. You know, I have no technology degree. You know, it's started out in audit, and we kept seeing that we were writing up the same things over and over again. It's like, man, this company needs a security team because they keep getting all these issues. And so my boss and I, we left internal audit, went over to IT, and started up the first security function inside of this company. And you know, I was managing firewalls and deploying IDSs and, you know, getting in there technically. And so then I went from there to another company to be a disaster recovery coordinator. So I built that company's disaster recovery plans. I left that company to go somewhere else to be an incident response person. So again, this goes back to, like, I just wanted to understand how all the pieces fit together. So I was purposefully taking not the same job in different companies. I was taking different jobs in different companies so that I could put all these pieces together. And then after a while, you know, I decided, all right, well, maybe I will go back, and I got my master's degree in information assurance. And so over a period of time, you start looking at a resume and going, hey man, you know, I got this, I got this, I got this, I got these degrees, I got this experience, and you know, then it all just added up to, hey, you know, you're the CISO at Lear now, you know, and so there are definitely different paths to get there, and you know, you can start pretty much anywhere. You know, that's the beautiful thing about technology and security in general is I have people working for me that have biology degrees, psychology degrees. You know, it's a very open, you know, environment to get in there from different, you know, backgrounds.
But I think we're losing some of that, right? I think that was a huge advantage.
And that's my
right? I think
worry
we're
with all
losing
these
some of that
degrees. You know, when you get a degree in security, that's my concern is that you're going to start getting these very narrow path people that don't have that broad experience anymore, and they're just learning what, you know, Eastern Michigan, which I love that program. I'm an advisor for Eastern Michigan. But if you look at, you know, how they're putting those programs together, you know, you're going to lose some of that, you know, eclectic feel to security and in IT.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if you asked what is the most important trait, right, to be a CISO, I think it's critical thinking, right? You've got to understand technology. If you don't understand technology, don't even be in the room, right? And, you know, we went through this kind of shift. Everybody's like, well, you know, CISO's got to be business people. You've got to understand business, right? But that doesn't mean you can't understand tech. You don't have to understand technology,
Yeah.
right? If you don't understand technology and you're a CISO, you will have IT people who will intentionally or unintentionally lead you down the wrong path because they don't fully understand the systems that they're managing and they're responsible for.
Any more questions over there? Any questions out in the audience? Oh, I should have known. I should have known. So Brian is saying that my job is really hard. And I will agree with you 100%. You know, I worked in financial services and a couple other industries and in manufacturing. And, you know, I'm probably a little biased, but I would say that working in manufacturing is way harder than working in some of these other fields that are a little bit more regulated. And I look at my friends in the financial services industry, and I tell you, it is, I'm going to get into a dispute here with Za in the back of the room. When you have regulators that come and tell you, like, hey, you need to put DLP in, you just go put DLP in. when you have regulators telling you that you got to keep your cardholder data environment in a different, you got to put controls in there, you go put controls in there. There is no regulator, there is no, regulation for manufacturing, and so I don't have a checklist that says, here are the things we have to have. So when you talk about being a politician, I always call it, I got to be a salesman.
Yep.
Is, I have to do all that convincing of, we need to have this, we need to have this, we need to have this, and it's different when you don't have that regulation or that regulator telling you or telling your boss that this is what you have to do.
Yeah.
So is there a question there?
What I was going to say, because you were talking about like your background, where you came from, finance, your background, right? Why aren't we taking a look at some of those problem solvers that were in production control, quality control, plant managers? Because every plant has a plant manager. There's only one CISO. So you got 50, 200 plants. You got 200 guys that are working on business continuity every day, trying to make sure that things. You will have manufacturers like Lear or Eicher build an entirely second plant, just because GM says we can't have one source location because that plant catches on fire. So you're willing to put another $500 million to keep business continuity going, right? And those people work on that day in and day out. And it's the same thing security's doing, but yet you have all these other people now putting all these IT products in because the business needs them. But it's so different from the fundamental business that we really make.
Yeah, I could spend a half an hour talking about how we have enlisted the business to be a force multiplier for our security team. Because there is no way that, no matter how big your security team is, whether it's 50, 100, or 200, when you have 275 locations and 175,000 employees, you got to get help for those people. And so, we go out to each plant, and there's, an ambassador in each one of those plants that helps us, put up posters and help us do the security awareness stuff. They're early warning system for us if something strange is happening at that plant.
You don't have BSOs?
So that helps out.
You don't have BSOs for the different business units?
No,
or?
not for us. No, when I was at GE, we had BSOs.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I always did it in the past, was you had division information security officers. Right?
Yeah.
You have to have that.
All right, so.
But I think, look, I don't know if there's anybody here that works in healthcare, but I got to tell you, that is the most difficult place to be a CISO ever, right? And so the 2 county governments I worked at, we had medical clinics, we had hospitals, we had all that. For both of them, I was the HIPAA security officer. And, there's no users that are as difficult to interact with as doctors. Right? And I've had doctors tell me before, these hands save lives. You can't slow them down. I got that doctor back because I shut the hospital down, which was a kind of an interesting story. I broke my right ankle, dislocated it.
All right, this is the last story. I'm cutting you off after this.
I was playing golf, right? And
well, Eric can cut you off.
broke my ankle, broke both bones, dislocated my ankle, and I fell out of the golf cart. Yeah, golf carts are dangerous, right? Wear the seatbelt. But it was the same day that I cut the hospital off. I shut down their internet access because they had a virus, and so. The people I worked with, I was playing with people I worked with, and we went back to somebody's car, and he was going to take me to the emergency room, and I said, you can't take me to that hospital because they all hate me because I just shut off their internet access. So I went to an urgent care instead, and then went a few days later to another place to get some screws put in. But yeah, healthcare is the worst. It's tough.
All right. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up. As usual, if you're not a member of the CSA Detroit, sign up on LinkedIn. And remember that the first Tuesday of every month is CSA Tuesday. So we'll be back here. We'll be back here next month on the first Tuesday of the month. So join us then. If you're online, thanks for joining. Think about coming in person. This place is full. And we're probably going to need a bigger room here pretty soon, and I love it. So thanks for joining. Also, do you have the CPE page? All right, CPE credits, email renew, and let's get those requests in there. We all need CPE credits. So again, thank you for showing up, and we appreciate it. See you next month.